dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle. And let's begin exploring the wine glass. Today, we return to Winephabet Street, where the letter of the day is B for Baco Noir. We are extremely thankful to Carlo DeVito, who not only gave us an incredible webinar, but came back to do it a second time after we had some technical difficulties. Baco Noir is what is considered a hybrid grape. It was created by crossing two different species of vitis. Typical grape varieties, such as Cabernet Franc or Sauvignon Blanc, belong to Vitis vinifera. However, there are other species of vitis, such as lambrusca and riparia. These modern varieties were created to provide fruit that is resistant to powdery mildew, other fungal diseases, nematodes, and of course, phylloxera. Join us as we discuss exactly what Baco Noir is, where did it come from, and what is the most similar Vitis vinifera in terms of characteristics. If you find a bottle of Baco, please let me know how you liked it. While you're listening, please take a moment to rate and review Exploring the Wine Glass. Ratings are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible. Taking 1 minute of your time is the only way the algorithms will suggest Exploring the Wine Glass to others. Slancha.
Oh, yeah.
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, sommelier service, champagne specialist, and WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass.
Right into wine, so you and I.
Welcome to another episode of Winephabet Street. Today, we are very, very, very thankful to Carlo DeVito for coming back to us because earlier we did Baco Noir Part 1, and it was an incredible episode, and technology defeated us, and it didn't record. So,
all that greatness lost.
Right?
First time ever.
Yeah.
So I'm taping it right now. So, audio. So if anything happens, hopefully we'll just have audio.
Sure.
Well, that is what that echo was. I was trying to record it in the background also, and apparently it was doing a double whammy there. So I shut mine off. So we're going to rely on Webinar Jam and Deb to get this right, because it was such an incredible episode and so interesting. So our guest is Carlo DeVito. He is the former owner of Hudson Chatham Winery in New York and author of more than 20 books, which blows my mind. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, well, we appreciate it. And for those who do not know me, I am Lori Budd, your co-host. I am a WSET Level 2 graduate, champagne specialist, Côte d'Rhône, and currently in week 3 of the Spanish Wine Scholar Guild's program, and am remembering how difficult it is to study. I am also the co-owner with my husband of Dracaena Wines and in Paso Robles, and my co-host, Deb.
I'm Debbie Giaquindo. I'm known as the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. I'm a certified specialist of wine, a wine location specialist in port and champagne, and a certified sherry wine specialist. I'm author of the book, Tapping the Hudson Valley, Day Trips and Weekend Itineraries to the Hudson Valley Wine Region. And I'm a partner in a restaurant in North Wildwood, New Jersey, Trio North Wildwood, where it's ramping up, and that's going to be where I spend the next 4 months.
Yes, and I right beforehand she was already on the phone taking reservations, so they're filling up. So I think we are going to let Elmo come in, and to get rid of the technology voodoo thing. I brought Elmo to this episode, so hopefully he brings us a little laughter and some good luck on this one. So why don't we start the video and then we'll let Carlos do a little intro of himself, and then most importantly, we'll be able to pour a little wine and enjoy. So tonight, thanks to Debbie, I have another bottle. This is Hudson Chatham 2015 Reserve Baco Noir.
Nice.
From the Castle's Vineyard.
Yes. So, Deb, are you drinking?
I've got a 2010 Baco. Wow. I Corvan these last time, so, and I have a Block 3 North Creek Vineyard. 2016.
One of my faves.
All right.
And,
now
I have a 2015 Middle Hope, which is a vineyard that no longer exists. And this is the one that got a 91 in Wine Enthusiast.
Very nice. So, Carla, can you give us a little background on yourself, a little brief introduction so people know a little bit more than my very, very brief introduction? And while you're doing that, I'm going to raise a glass, say slancha, and enjoy some Baco Noir.
Cheers. Yes. So I was a editor and a publisher for more than 20 years, and I worked especially in history, science, and then food, wine, beers, and spirits. So I've worked with Kevin Zraly, Oz Clark, Matt Kramer, Tom Stevenson. Did the New York Times Book of Wine. I shepherded the Wine Spectator book program for many years. And then I owned Hudson Chatham Winery. Mostly I've been writing about whiskey recently, but my new book coming out in July is called Drink the Northeast. And it's about all the best wineries, distilleries, breweries, and cideries from Maine to Connecticut and Rhode Island. So that'll be out in July.
That sounds like fantastic research to me.
Yes.
And I've been most recently making wine at Unionville Vineyards in New Jersey for the last 7.5 months.
All right.
You get around.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So I know from the last time we spoke that there's a dirty little word when it comes to Baco Noir called hybrid. But can you please explain what is meant by hybrid and why it's kind of that dirty little word?
Yeah, I got a hybrid is exactly what people think it is, the crossing of two genuses. And what happened was in the 1800s, there was a phylloxera epidemic in Europe, and a little vine louse that would go into the dirt and eat the roots of the plants and kill off the plants. And for many years, growers were hybridizing classic vinifera grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Pinot Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. And they were taking those grapes and trying to crossbreed them with American rootstock, which were impervious to this little vine louse called phylloxera. What the solution was in the end was they just took American rootstock, planted it, and then grafted Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot or Pinot Noir onto these plants, and that's how they saved winemaking in Europe. But in the meantime, you had this 60-year period where all these different nurseries, especially in Europe, were trying to develop this super plant to try to overcome phylloxera. And you had a lot of people come up with new grapes. That wasn't the only reason. A lot of hybrid grapes, so-called, were hybridizers were creating them to grow in the soils or conditions where they were. So, for example, if you had high alkaline soil, they were trying to breed a grape that would do well in a high alkaline soil, where they would do well, where they would get wet feet. There were a number of different reasons, but phylloxera was what originally really drove the the conversation. Here in the United States, the hybrids gained a huge foothold through a man named Philip Wagner, who owned then Bordy Vineyards. And he was even more famous because he was the editor of the Baltimore Sun. He had succeeded H.L. Mencken as the publisher of the Baltimore Sun. He was the person who saved East Coast winemaking by introducing hybrids to begin with back in the 40s and 50s. And one of his big discoveries that he really made his name on was Baco Noir. Baco Noir was developed by Monsieur Baco, and it was actually Baco Noir #1. He got it right on the first try. He tried a number of others, didn't realize how good he had it with #1. So Philip Wagner really promoted a number of these hybrid grapes. Why were they so popular? #1, they were cold resistant, so it could get cold as it did in the East, and the plants would survive the winter. They were also required a lot less spraying and maintenance because here in the East, we have a lot of humidity. We have a lot of other pressures that they don't have in California. So you had to have a hardy plant that was going to survive these other conditions as well. And so Baco Noir and a group of others became very popular. They were easier to grow. They flourished here in the Northeast. The problem is that as the years went by, Dr. Frank introduced the ways to grow vinifera here on the East Coast. And hybrids were used to make, I'm going to be blunt, crappy wines. You grow a lot of Baco Noir. You would let it ferment for 2-3 weeks to get this big inky black wine, and then you just throw a ton of sugar into it because it's got a lot of acidity, and you made popular sweet wines. And so hybrids got like a really dirty name for that because they were just using rather low-end techniques to make these wines, and so their reputation went that way. One of the people that I truly believe has led a resurgence in that is our own Steve Castles, who joined us. We bought our farm in January of 2006, planted our first grapes in 2006, and in the end of 2007 or beginning of 2008, we ripped out, I don't know, a third to half of all our grapes. And Steve replanted everything with 2 main grapes, which were Baco Noir and something called Chelois. And he also brought back a number of other hybrids that really had been lost to other people, including Bourdain and a number of others. So we had tremendous success with those wines. Why? Because we treated them like vinifera. We thinned fruit, we pulled leaves in the cellar. We didn't overdo it. We really tried to make a nice, soft, approachable wine instead of trying to make this big, inky, dark thing that was going to keep up with, in terms of looks, with Napa, because it's not what you do here anyway. And we came up with some lovely sort of soft, approachable, Pinot style, Rhônish style reds that did incredibly well. And we were the first winery to get a 90 or better from Wine Enthusiast for our Baco Noir. So that was the first time anybody had broken that glass ceiling for a red hybrid wine. And we were very proud of that. And our wines were in all the top restaurants in Manhattan. We were in Rouge Tomate. We were in Il Buco. We were in a number of big restaurants in the city. So it was a real big thrill. And we went on to get a lot of good scores and a lot of lovely reviews, and I'm really happy with that. And Steve has sort of led the charge since then with his book. And there's just a lot going on now with hybrids. People say hybrids is like it's a dirty word. It's become synonymous with cheap, crappy wine. And what you see now are people taking these grapes and reinventing them in much more interesting ways, using modern techniques to make fine wine out of them. And there's a lot of really fantastic people making great wines using what are hybrids. But, I would just say they're interesting grapes.
All right, interesting grapes.
The Baco, I first got introduced to Baco from you and from Steve. and I had the Middle Hope Vineyard. I think you have that, Lori, that wine?
I have
I
the
do.
Castles.
She has the
Vineyard.
Castle Vineyard. I have the Middle Hope.
Oh, you have the Middle Hope. So you sent me, somehow I was at somebody sent me to the Middle Hope Vineyard. It might have even been you to pick something up. And Steve gifted me a bottle of, Baco he was really, really proud of. And it was like 6 or 7 years old. I'm like, this ages?
Yeah.
And I took it home. I had it and I was blown away. I was like, holy cow, really opened my eyes up to Baco, where before, honestly, I didn't have a good opinion of it. And yes, it was hybrid. So no, I'm not going to, drink it. But I really enjoy a Baco now. And it goes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a good Baco can last quite a long time. It's got tremendous flavor. It's got
here I have one that's 12 years old.
Yeah.
And it's drinking very well.
So, I mean, that's why they're kind of called, that there's that dirty little term hybrid, is because most people use it their hybrids to make, big, sweet pink rosés or big, heavy, sweet reds or port. They're not putting in the time to make a fine wine out of it. And when you do put in that effort, you really can extract an exceptional wine. And there's a lot of good people doing it, not just Steve, but Steve is now over at Malaya Vineyards, and he's got his whole new line of heritage, Hudson Heritage grape, Hudson Heritage series of wines over there. So you can get
I think that's like a big thing across the whole world, not even wine world, right? It's that first impression. And once somebody has that first impression, it takes so much more to break that first impression than if, even if it's not their own first impression, right? They're reading somebody else's first impression or hearing somebody else's first impression. So, well,
I think the big new step is that in Bordeaux now they've allowed for the first time in I don't know how many generations the growth of a specified number of hybrid grapes. It's the first time in literally 4 or 5 generations. So it's a really big deal.
So wasn't Baco produced over in France too? And then
Baco was produced over in France, and it was brought over. As I said, the person who really made it famous was Philip Wagner, and then the next person who grew it to some fame was Ben Marl Winery with Mark Miller, and Mark was a very good friends with Philip Wagner. Philip Wagner, by the way, also wrote 3 winemaking books that are still in print today and have sold millions and millions of copies. So he really was one of the fathers of East Coast winemaking. Then, as you and I were discussing, Debbie, before the show began, the next big grower of Baco, of quality Baco, was Girardet, which is a family of French descent who live in Oregon. And Girardet Vineyards makes a Baco Noir that is absolutely stunning. So there's Baco on the West Coast, and Baco's grown all over. Baco's grown throughout New York State. Again, some of it goes into blends of all different kinds and ports and things like that. But if you go over into the Niagara Peninsula, Henry F. Pelham makes an absolutely stellar Baco Noir. There are a number of good Baco Noirs when you go over the line there. And then, of course, so those are some of the ones that I really love. And then there are people who are making other quality hybrids, like Victory View up in above Albany was featured in the New York Times by Eric Asimov, and he's making stellar Marquettes. You've got Shelbourne, who's making Marquette to just a tremendous level in Vermont. So there's a number of really good wines that are out there that are just really happening. And of course, you've got the La Garagista, who's making all kinds of cool natural wines, and they're using a lot of hybrids as well. And they're found in the best stores and restaurants. So there's a lot of quality stuff coming around.
So it is a hybrid grape. Who are Baco's parents?
Oh, gosh, I should have studied this before I came on. Alicante, I believe, was one of them, if I'm not mistaken. Or is that
Oh.
Chelois? I forget, because Chelois was another big grape that that Steve brought back. But the idea was that when you make it, you can either.
Follet Blanc.
Oh, yes, there's a Blanc in there.
Yeah.
And of course, Baco Blanc, which is a sister, which is another one of Baco's grapes. Baco Blanc is one of the grapes that goes into cognac. So it's very well grown in the cognac region. So yeah. So there you go. Little fun fact.
There you go.
Mr. Baco did okay.
So are the Baco vines phylloxera resistant?
Yes, they are, and they don't grow like vinifera. I think when we were chatting last time, I was trying to explain when you grow vinifera, you've seen them in all these wonderful, beautiful vineyards, right? They're able to cut out the fruit zone, and you see all this beautiful low-hanging fruit, and then the shoots go up this way, and then they get trimmed, and it's all very beautiful. It's like topiary at the good wineries. Baco is got some river rat in it, and so it just grows everywhere. It's just a giant explosion, and I have to tell you, there was nothing better than seeing that when we first put it in, because we had some other grapes in there. I had tried to grow Muscat, and it was just an absolute disaster. And Steve said, no, we're going to rip all that out. We're going to put in Baco. And when you have an unhappy plant, you go out to the farm every day, out to the vineyard, and you have these struggling plants, and you're like, what are we doing wrong? Like, what is wrong with us? It's got to be our fault. And Steve put in Baco, and it was just, it was like chia pets. I mean, the thing just took off. And I remember in our second year, we had to get a machete and chop through the rows, because they had literally just grown across from each other. We had no idea the strength of these vines. So you get leaders up to 20, 30 feet like nothing. So it's a very vigorous plant in the right area, and they're very hardy. We don't get a lot of winter dieback, we did our best to try to control some of the fruit, remove what we called Christmas berries. That fruit that we didn't think was going to be ripe until Christmas. We take those down so that the plant concentrates on the good fruit that we think is going to make harvest. And we discovered in our growing that there really were two kind of clones, if you will. Not that they're officially recognized, but they're completely different grapes or plants. The stuff that Steve has in his vineyard and that we propagated at least half of in our vineyard produces a beautiful bright red wine, almost like cherry juice. Really, really pretty stuff. Steve didn't have enough plants, so we called up several of the nurseries in upstate New York, and we were able to buy enough to supplement a large block, the block 3. So we planted Steve's stuff up high, and the Finger Lake stuff in the lower part of the block. And what we were realizing is that, number one, the grapes at the bottom of the block gave off a much darker fruit. Had a lot more sort of dark cherry, maybe even a hint of blueberry to it. And the ones at the top were very bright red cherry. The stuff at the bottom actually was ready about 7 to 10 days earlier than the stuff at the top. So, there was no difference in the amount of sun each piece of that vineyard block got, but it was very clear that the ones at the bottom were matured first and were ready. And if you waited for the whole block, you were going to lose a lot of fruit down the bottom. So we had to make 2, sometimes even 3 tries through the vineyard to get the fruit at the exact right moment. And it's all something you learn when you have a vineyard.
Now, the ones that were lower, were they more susceptible to frost?
They no, because there was still a lot of grade left in the hill after that. The only thing was the last row was, I don't know, maybe a 50 to 100 yards from the nearest tree line. Not even, I don't think. But that last row is always the toughest. But I think that's true in a lot of vineyards. I don't think that's a big deal. But as I said, we'd have to get after those bottom 10 rows much earlier than we could let the other ones push on a little further.
So I'm guessing it was kind of like a trial and error system to know exactly how much manipulation, to what, how many leaf, layers it likes to grow its best, and how much green drop to do. Like, was it when you first got in?
I don't know if it's trial and error. It's just a matter of getting at it, which is not always easy, right? I mean, it's the middle of summer when you're at your busiest in the season in terms of the tasting room and festivals, etc. So, it's just a manpower issue at that point. Do we have enough hands to go out there and do it? Pulling leaves on Baco is tough only because, as I said, Baco doesn't have that nice straight fruit zone. You've got to search out the largest clusters and pull around those, and then just keep sticking and moving. That takes a little bit of getting used to, or trying to understand how the patterns go and things like that. It's not easy. The Christmas berries, that was actually pretty easy. Matter of fact, several years we actually made verjus from it. We actually collected those berries, crushed them, and made a verjus out of it. And we sold that to restaurants, and we sold it in our tasting room. It was great for mignonette and all that kind of stuff. So it was really, really popular. We made a small amount of it, like 20, 30 cases. But that did very well for us. But it's just a matter of having enough hands to do that. And that's always your biggest issue, especially, like I said, summertime. We've got so much going on, farmers markets, festivals, events. You just hope you have enough hands to get at it. That's, finding labor is always the most difficult part of owning a farm or a vineyard.
A business.
Oh, my gosh.
A business these days, finding labor is very hard.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Exploring the Wine Glass is brought to you by Dracaena Wines. Dracaena Wines is an artisan winery located in Paso Robles, California. They have been producing wine since 2013. Their first vintage began with one wine, their classic Cabernet Franc, which received a 91 in Wine Enthusiast. Since then, they have increased production as well as expanded their portfolio, have received many accolades including multiple double gold medals and consistent 90-plus ratings. Visit their website, www.dracaenawines.com, or use the link in the show notes to schedule a private tasting and to see their entire portfolio. Purchase your award-winning wine and let Dracaena Wines help turn your moments into great memories. Well, let's talk about the wines a bit. So I have, as I said, the 2015 Reserve, from Castle's Vineyard. So can you first tell us a little bit about this vineyard site and how it compares to
So we had three. Well, we actually had 5 different Bacos at one point because I'm insane. So one of the things that we did have was we had Castle's Vineyard. So that's Steve's personal vineyard where he still lives. And at the time when we first started with Steve, I think those vines were 15 years old or something like that. He was already a local legend up here in the Catskill region, the local guy who made local wine, and everybody went over his house for barbecues or, traded for a bottle of wine, that kind of thing. Or, oh, I have one of those bottles. Did you get to taste it? That kind of thing. And I met him at he was in a amateur wine competition, and it was the Hudson Valley. Well, I think Debbie, were you involved in that one, or you were just a guest at that one?
With
it had to be 2006. It was the wine competition in 2006.
The amateur one?
Yeah, it was all together. They were all together because it was held at Stout Ridge.
That was my first.
That was your first one.
My first wine competition.
Yeah. So anyway,
little did I know I was going to be running it years later.
So I met Steve then, and of all the wines I tasted, professional and amateur, my three favorite wines were two by Steve and one by the guy who now owns Paul Donino, who owns I can't remember the name of the place.
Bashakil.
That's it, Bashakil. So those were my three favorite wines. And so I went to Paul was already working on building his own winery. And I went to Steve and I said, I need a winemaker. Would you be interested? And he goes, well, who'd be stupid enough to open up a winery? I was like, well, right here. Anyway, Steve was already making these wonderful wines. And so he came and he taught us how to make these wines. And this vineyard is a lovely vineyard. It's all on a big, gentle slope. These vines are in the back. He has about 6 acres. It's one of the most important privately owned experimental vineyards on the East Coast. And he's got hundreds and hundreds of different grapes. I remember we were walking through the vineyard one year and he turned around proudly. He said, I have all the Massachusetts hybrids. And I went, yeah, for all those who care. I don't know. Go to the Baco. I want to see what the Baco is looking like. And so the wines from there always had a lovely, bright cherry flavor to them. They had a much brighter red color. They were soft. They had a little bit more acidity, but they were also just beautiful. The Baco Noir Block 3, which is a blend of the Finger Lakes and of the ones from Steve. The ones from Steve had come directly from Philip Wagner. These were and from Ben Marl. These were vines that had been smuggled into the country from France by Philip Wagner and by Mark Miller. So these really came direct from France. The stuff from the Finger Lakes, as I said, just is a little different, has a lot of the same feel, grows the same way, etc., looks the same. But the berries are a little darker, a little heavier, and a little more dark cherry as opposed to light cherry. And so that was a great win for us because we were able to marry both of them together, and we got a really lovely, complex wine. It was a full square acre of Baco, and it did incredibly, incredibly well for us. We had a third vineyard, which was Pulteney Farm, which was out in the Finger Lakes. When we first started doing the wines with Steve, we couldn't keep them in stock. We'd make, 60 cases, 100 cases, and they'd be sold out in 4 or 5 weeks. And so I had called up the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. They forwarded me to the Grape Growers Association. And I said, look, I need Baco. Do you know anybody who's willing to, I'm willing to make a commitment. Do you have somebody who's growing Baco? And I got a call back literally within the day from the president who said, I found you a block of Baco. It's 60 years old. Would you be interested? And I said, I'm coming up tomorrow. I toured the vineyard at 7 a.m. and I signed a 5-year contract at 7:30.
Now, isn't that the wine that you made with the rocks?
Well, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. So that was the Baco old vines, and that was from 60-year-old vines. And the funny part was they were 60 when we first leased the property. And I think we actually ended up having them for almost 10 years. And our general manager, Brian Van Dusen, was halfway through. He was like, Carlo, you keep saying the vines are 60 years old. We've been making this wine 7 years. Like, you're not keeping up. You're not doing the math. Then we did Middle Hope. Steve had his childhood. In high school, Steve planted his first vineyard in the back of his parents' house. He had let it go because he was married, living with his children and his wife up here in Catskill. And we were desperate for Baco. And I said, dude, I'll put in the money if you put in the work. Let's go revive that vineyard. It's a half an acre. That's a lot of wine for a little place like us. And that's 35-year-old vines. So I'm down for that. And so it took 2 years of, it had been overgrown by the trees, and it had trees growing up in the middle of the vineyard. We had a guy named Ralph Cooley back then who went down with chainsaws and all that kind of good stuff. And we cleared it out, put a fence up, the whole 9 yards. And we got the Middle Hope. And the Middle Hope was one of the first big scores that we got was with the Middle Hope, the 90 or 91 from Wine Enthusiast. So that was a big one for us. And then we had the Baco Noir, old Fieldstone Baco Noir, and the Fieldstone Baco Noir. The I had read about Randall Graham, who is one of my big heroes, and he was making cigar violante, and he was taking crushed gravel and putting it in his wine to add extra flavor and complexity to this wine. And I was like, that's freaking brilliant. So I came up with the idea that we would take stones from our farm and put them in the old vines. Since the old vines weren't technically our grapes in terms of being an estate grape, I figured, well, we'll take these are our estate rocks. We're going to put it in there. We're going to see if something good happens. So I made the first one. We had a tank. I filled the tank with the rocks. We poured in the old vines. The next morning, I ran down, pardon the visual, but I ran down in my underwear at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I put the tap, and I'm like, tasted the wine, and it was like somebody had gone to the bathroom in my wine, and I was just like, oh my God. And this was a Sunday morning because we had done it on a Saturday, and I came in, and Dominique was like, so how was it? I said, oh, no, nothing yet. I didn't want to tell her I just ruined $7,000 worth of wine. So I had to go to work the next day, and before I went to work, I went down again, tasted it. It was even worse. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done with this wine? It got progressively worse, and I had to tell Dominique that this was a bust. And I put barrels in front of that tank, anything, just so I didn't have to look at it. And one day, Ralph, who was our farm manager at the time, came into me and he said, look, everybody else is afraid to talk to you about this. He goes, but we need that tank. And whatever the hell's in there, it's got to go. Either we'll put it in a blue barrel and you can play with it, we can make vinegar out of it, or we just hook a hose up to it and we'll run it out and we'll write it off. Because if it sucks, well, let's just get rid of it. And I said, okay. So he said, I want you to taste it first because I don't want to put it in a barrel if I don't have to. He said, I'd rather just let it go. So I tasted it, and I was like, it had turned in this weird 6-8 week period. It had absolutely turned, and it was everything I had hoped for. It was the farmyard without, if you'll pardon my expression, it was the farmyard without the chicken shit. It was fat. It had that complexity that you were looking for. So I said, screw this. Let's get the bottling machine up. Let's put it in a bottle and get rid of it. Thank God, And I have to say, I gave full credit to Dominique. She took all the rocks that were in the tank. She rinsed them off, and she made a giant pile in the middle of our tasting room bar and put a couple of bottles around it. And it sold like crazy. And it was a huge hit. And so we had to do it every year. And the worst part was every year it stank like hell the first 2 or 3 weeks. And I would say, like, please, Lord, don't let this be the year it doesn't turn. And that was our Fieldstone Baco Noir. So we made 5 different Bacos, and they were all our goal was either they were single vineyard or they had something really special about them, and that was really our goal.
Well, that's pretty special.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we were trying to do real hardcore boutique winemaking and really trying to up the game of what people were doing. And we did the same thing with Chalois, which was another one of these grapes that Steve had brought back. I don't think there was any. I think there was only one other vineyard in the whole country, or two maybe, that were growing Chalois when we brought it back. And again, we got rave reviews for that wine. Again, a beautiful cherry kind of finish. And those 2 wines really put us on the map, and we made them, like I said, like fine wine. So that was our goal. Aged them in older oak, 2nd and 3rd year oak, and just baby them just the same way you would a Pinot Noir or anything else.
So do you like put on the same level Baco and Pinot? Not to compare the two, not to say, but you talk about Baco and you talk about Pinot in the same sentence.
It depends on the kind of style you're making, in my opinion. Some people still like to make big, heavy Bacos, and some of them are incredibly, incredibly good. We really concentrated on trying to make our Baco like Pinot, so we didn't let our fruit macerate on the skins for as long as other people do. I mean, somewhere between 5 and 7 days, we were usually off the skins. We were looking for a much lighter, brighter, softer, approachable red that we thought you could compare to a Pinot or a Rhone style red. And I think we accomplished that. I'll never forget, we went to a Hudson Valley winemakers tasting, and you're supposed to bring wines in process. And they did a Baco round, and there were a number of people who were making Baco, and they got to, it was a blind tasting. We got to it, and everybody gave us like a 4 or a 5 out of 5. And I was so proud because I knew it was ours. And this one fellow said, "Oh, I give it a 0." So the fellow who ran the tasting, Mike Migliore, said, "Well, you got to defend that score."
Mm-hmm.
And because everybody else gave it a great rating. And he said, "Well, to me, it didn't taste like Baco." So I said, "Well, what did you think it tasted like?" He said, "Well, it tasted like a good Pinot Noir." And I went, "That's okay. I'll take that.
I'll take that 0.
So, and that's what we were trying to accomplish. That's really, and I think that's why so many people were shocked by what we were doing, is because we weren't trying to make a big, ugly red. We were trying to make a really high quality. A lot of people compared it to like a light Barolo, and those were the kind of wines we were trying to aim for.
Well, it's got that acidity to it.
Right.
It's got that great acidity, which is why the flavor lasts, which is why it sellers well. It's a great food wine. I'll never forget the first year we made Steve's wine. Dominique and I went out to dinner, and we went to this little Italian restaurant that no longer is there in Hudson, New York. And we went with another couple, and I said, we knew the owners, and I said, "Look, we're going to buy a bottle of wine, but I'll pay the corkage fee. We'd like to start off with our own wine." And they had these big, beautiful Riedel glasses. And so the waiter took it away, came back, and he passed around the glasses, and we all cheered, and we took a sip. And I called the waiter over. I said, "Oh, no. I wanted the our wine first." I was like, this is a really nice wine. And he goes, no, that is your wine. Well, I had never tasted it in a nice glass. You're working in a winery. You got little crappy glasses, because if you break them and bust them, you don't want to even have to think about it. And it was so funny. We had never actually tasted this wine in a really nice glass. And it was just, it was a shock to me. That's how really thrilled we were with it. And,
so a glass does make the difference.
Glasses definitely make a difference. Absolutely. And it was a big thrill. But yeah, that's what we were trying to accomplish.
So what did you have for dinner that night with the Baco? What's your top pairings?
No, I didn't have veal. I had pork. I had grilled chops, which is perfect for that. It's the same stuff you would pick out for a Rhone or a Pinot. White meats, poultry, like chicken, fowl, any kind of fowl. Those are the things you're looking for. It's perfect with roast chicken. Again, anything you'd pair a Pinot with, you'd look to do that with, at least with our Bacos.
So let's talk about the taste of a Baco. What can people expect when they taste a Baco? And then I'm going to ask you, with that being said, talk about the Oregon Baco and how it differs from.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. One of the things you really expect as a solid profile definer is that there's always a sour cherry element to it. And it's not we're not talking about, we're not talking about gummy bears or anything like that. We're talking about, it's a lovely cherry flavor, anything from a light, bright cherry with a little hint of sour, which is that bright acidity that comes through on the wine, all the way up to a dark sour cherry. With the Baco Noir old vines, no matter what we did, it came out almost as a lovely sort of Italian style red. It just had this beautiful feeling to it. And again, we didn't leave the grapes on the skins for real long. We aged it in older oak. Really got some really beautiful flavors going. So again, you're looking at Rhone, maybe some lighter Italian style wines, Nebbiolos, things like that, Dolcettos. That's the kind of feeling. If you're looking for similar tasting patterns from what we were doing, that's where we were headed, and that's what you got. With Baco Noir, for example, and that's what Henry Appellam was doing up in Canada, by the way, which was another place that we were really enamored of. Ben Marl was still making Baco Noir back then, and theirs was more like our old vines, because they had old vines. And so I was always thrilled by that, because I always loved the Ben Marl Baco. When you go out west, you've just got these big hot days that they have that we just don't have, and they have a bigger growing season. It's drier. Theirs is much darker, but the acidity falls off for them. So the acidity is not as high as it is back out east. One of the grapes that I would use as an example is when you have Sauvignon Blanc is another. It's a white hybrid, very, very acidic. And if you pull it early, you can make great sparkling with it. You can make a Vino Verde or a Sauvignon Blanc style white. If you just press it and put it into stainless steel, it actually works really, really lovely. The more you try to chase the sugars on that, you're better off pulling it when it's at 18 bricks. If you chase it to like 21 bricks or 22 bricks, 24 bricks, the acidity just drops off the table and you get this flabby white wine. With the Baco on the West Coast, that they chase that sugar, but the acidity falls off, and that's not a bad thing there because there's still plenty of acidity to give it a nice, good feel, but it's not as dramatic as what we have. So you get this big, soft, plush red. It's it's not as dark as a Cabernet Sauvignon, but it's certainly as dark as a Merlot. It's got this lovely, lovely color to it, beautiful dark red color to it. And it's just this big, soft, fruity mouthfeel. Lots of bright cherry and dark cherry, all mingled in there. A little bit of bramble, which is also common to any Baco, East Coast or West Coast. It's a much different wine. It's a bigger wine. It's a California wine. If you know what I'm trying to say, it's got that big, deep color that I think a lot of consumers have become used to. But it's a fantastic wine. And I brought a bottle over to Steve the other night, and I should have saved it for this evening. I apologize. But Steve loved it. You're like, oh, my God, this is fantastic. So, Mark Giraudet is the owner of Giraudet Vineyards, and he does a spectacular job with Baco Noir out there. And there are some other producers in Oregon and maybe a few in Washington. I know there are some others in Oregon who are also making Baco Noir. And so it's a big grape out there.
Are we seeing any Baco coming from like the old world still? Is there,
Oh, that's a good question. I know in England they do a number of hybrids, and I know Baco and Foch and a couple of those other Sauvignon Blanc are all grown throughout England. I'm not sure where else Baco is being grown. I mean, there's still some being grown in France. It's usually outside the main growing regions. So they might have it in Languedoc, but more often than not, these big regions are either growing what they need for Champagne or Burgundy or Bordeaux. All have their specific grapes. They're locked in,
right,
so to speak. But there are a number of farmers who grow Baco Noir outside of those regions, yes. Some of it's just for private use. And
I was going to say it could just be
and there are it's funny. We don't even think of it, but I remember I was driving around France with Dominique. We were in Jurançon, which is a lovely little area, and they were growing grapes. They were growing all kinds of grapes. So, and they were making blends. The French are much more interested in like whatever they grow, they're going to put it in the pot and they're going to make a house blend. And so I know there were some vineyards that were growing Baco down in that region, but of course it just gets put into a blend, which is their tradition over there. At least it was at the time.
I'm thinking you brought up England and it growing there, and England is now becoming a place known for sparkling wines because of the climate change and all of this. So how do you see the fact that Baco was actually bred to be cold tolerant? Where do you see the future? What's happening to Baco now that these temperatures are changing?
Well, I mean, I could tell you that a number of wineries have came to us when I was there at Hudson Chatham, and have come to see Steve since, who are looking for new grapes, new flavor profiles to widen their portfolio and bring something different to the marketplace. And he's been selling vines because he has his own nursery to a number of different wineries, including the West Coast. But you're seeing now that more people are understanding that you can make fine wines out of hybrids, and you're seeing new hybrids. For example, Marquette, the Minnesota hybrids like Marquette and Frontenac Gris and Le Crescent. These are grapes that are building followings, and so you're starting to see between the hybrids and the Minnesota hybrids, you're seeing vineyards pop up in places you weren't finding them before. I mean, if you go above Albany in New York State, 10, 15 years ago, there were maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 vineyards up there. Now there's an entire wine trail up there, complete with about 15 or 16 wineries. They're growing grapes in a lot of other places that they didn't before. You're seeing huge amounts of grapes being grown now. I say huge. You're seeing a lot more grapes being grown in. I was just in New Hampshire over the past weekend, where I was at a place where they were growing Baco Noir and Deschanach and a whole bunch of other, a combination of the two different hybrids. Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, they're all growing a lot. They're less afraid of growing hybrids now that better wines are out there. And it's been a younger customer who has embraced these wines. People who were in their 40s and 50s, especially when we started, they were like, Baco? Yeah, well, I'll try the Baco. And we noticed immediately there were two levels of customers. There were people in the 40s and older, and they read wine enthusiasts, and they read Wine Spectator. They wanted to know, did we have any scores? You know, did Frank Pryall or Eric Asimov write about it? They had very specific places they went for information about wine. We saw with younger clients, people who were like, say, 21 to 35, 40, were much more open to try new wines. A lot of Cabernet Sauvignons had been priced out of the market for them, and they were trying to find that thing that they could call their own. Really good Pinot Noirs were also very expensive. So they were looking for something new, something different. And we were very fortunate. We had a lot of people like the Edible Communities magazines wrote a lot about us. A lot of the bloggers like Len Thompson and a number of other folks have written about us. We've had so many people. Debbie wrote about us. I'm going to get killed because there's 50 people who have written about us that were so lovely. Like Susan Gordon from Forbes and Kathleen Wilcox and Shreves. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of lovely people who've written about us, and I couldn't be more grateful and thankful to them. I'm going to get shot by a bunch of 20 people that I failed to mention. Amy Zavato. I mean, I'm going to stop. I got to stop. But Chris, what's his name? So it's been a huge thrill in that way. And what happened was, those younger customers were much more interested in the stories about how we were making our wines and what we were doing. And they were much more open to trying our wines. But I was really proud that we were able to get a good portion of each of those groups. We had a nice mix between them. So it took a while, but it takes a while for anybody who's trying to make quality wine to, really get that going.
Absolutely.
Should we talk about what's in our glasses?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can answer this off of the top of your head, but do you know how many cases about you produced of this?
Which one is that one?
This is the 2015 Reserve.
Okay, so in a good year, we would produce maybe 75 to 100 cases, maybe.
Okay.
More often than not, it was 50 cases. But in a good year, we might get to 75 to 100. So he had a lot. At one point, he had a lot of bird penetration, turkeys, hawks. He was attacked by a hawk once. That was always a good story.
Oh no!
Yeah, he brought a tennis racket out and an umbrella. That was quite. The visual of him.
I wish I had that on video.
With an umbrella and a tennis racket is just way too much. So it varied. I think only one year we got 100 cases. The rest of it was 50 to 75. So it was very small production stuff. On the other hand, Old vines, oh my goodness, we'd get about 1,000 to 1,500 gallons. So you're talking, we would do 225 to 300 cases of Baco Noir old vines. That was our big workhorse. Middle Hope was 50 cases, 60 cases tops. That's a good year. Regular year was probably a barrel and a half. That was very small production, but it was such quality that we didn't care. And then our block 3 was probably 150 cases, maybe 200 in a good year. So those were the thing. Those were the kind of numbers we were dealing with. So a couple of them were really, really small. But between the block 3 and the old vines, we would get up to around 600 cases or around there.
So this I don't know if you can tell. I think this is starting to. It's got a little brick on the edges, but it's a 2015. And then I have to ask, and I don't mean not a negative positive. Was it hand bottled?
Everything was hand bottled. There was nothing. Okay. We had no machines.
Because I took the capsule off and I looked at the cork, and it didn't penetrate, but you can see the.
Yeah,
that was a mistake, unfortunately, but it became a kind of calling card for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get that only when you're doing that. Oh
yeah. And then eventually it was very funny because everything was hand corked up for the first 6 or 7 years. And, you had to stand there just ka-chunking this thing all day. And everybody would say, oh, no, Carlo, you're the best corker. You keep doing it. And as soon as we got a semi-automatic corking machine, all you do was push a button. Everybody wanted to cork after that.
It's a lot of work, and it's hard on the
I was
shoulders.
walking around like, I was looking like a hunchback in Notre Dame. I had like this big shoulder and right arm, and walking around like that.
You were Popeye on one side after he had the spinach, right?
But it was So the first 5 to 7 years it was all hand corked, and then we did get a semi-automatic corker, and that made a big difference because we were able to up our numbers. On
this, I'm getting. The acidity is definitely still there, and that sour cherry is there, but it's almost like a candied cherry.
Yeah, there's a little bit of candy, and there should be a little bit of bramble in there.
Yep. Yep. The bramble is on the nose. It's earthy floor on the palate. It's definitely how you had described it. It is all there. And
it's meant to be a food wine. Like that was really our goal all along, was to make, I remember when I first got there and I talked to Steve, I said, I want to find a way to we'll blend all these hybrids. We'll make a big California style Cabernet Sauvignon. He's like, no, that's not what we're going to do at all. So we're going to make soft approachable reds. And I was like, soft approachable reds? What the hell is that? And he was absolutely right. There's no question about it. He was absolutely right. He was fantastic.
Well, I'll tell you, I opened the 2010 Baco Reserve just to show how well a Baco ages. And like I said last time, I was blown away. I am blown away on how well it ages. This is smooth. It's elegant. It's got Bing cherry in it, raspberry. It's got a hint of the little sourness. And I think actually this one is probably at its peak.
At its peak. Yeah, yes. I would think so.
Definitely at its peak. And then the block 3 is 2016. And that one
should be about a lot fresher, right?
Yeah, it is a lot fresher. But once again, the whole Baco, it's smooth, it's elegant. I don't see how anybody cannot like it. You know what I mean? It's like I think the old thought process of hybrid was dirty and rough. Yes.
Right.
And this one
is not
raspberry. This has a little baking spice in it. I mean, it's really beautiful. And in our pre-recorded episode that didn't make it, I had opened a Benmaro 2016 Baco during the episode, and I'm looking at my notes here, and I wrote that it was a little bit more acidic, and the acidity was popping throughout the entire wine. So.
That wine made me fall in love with Baco Noir. There was no question about it. And then meeting Steve, of course, who started out at Benmaro making wines. And I did find, I posted it at one point or another. He was on the front page of the living section of the New York Times as a 16-year-old walking around with grapes. He had the most foul look on his face. He was so upset. And he looked, and it's so funny because when I saw it, his kids were the same age as he was in the photo. And oh my God, your kids are exactly you. It's just frightening. It was very funny. Yeah, I mean, that was the beauty of Steve. Like, he learned to make Baco Noir. By the time we met him, he'd been making Baco Noir for a good 20 years by the time we had met him. And he'd really perfected his ideas on how to do that. And we were really lucky. We were just in the right place at that time. And then we took what he showed us, and we made a few improvements here and there between Brian and I, and it all worked out. It was a great team effort.
You guys showed me how I got the appreciation for Baco, to be honest with you.
Thank you very much. It's been fun. I'll never get. I went one time. I was in Niagara, and I was tasting around. And I said, "Do you have a Baco Noir at this one restaurant, a winery?" And the guy said, "Baco Noir. That's like a gorilla in a tuxedo." And I was like, okay, so you're a jerk. You have no idea what you're talking about, but okay, fine, you know. The Middle Hope, just to chime in, has a lot of that big cherry. I mean, that's the beautiful side of Baco, that when you have one of those bright ones, it's got that bright sour cherry. And this Middle Hope is just spectacular. It's really beautiful. It's got that bramble, but it's also got that bright fruit and that acidity. It's just bringing it along. Still a great wine, and this is a 2015. Could easily go another couple of years. So really thrilled with that. Now I need a pork chop.
Come to the restaurant. I can help you with that.
There you go. Well, most of my stuff's in storage, but hopefully this summer I'll get it out and start bringing around the wines again. That'll be fun.
So we're coming up to 9 o'clock here. And if you want people 5 top things that you want people to take away about Baco Noir.
Ooh, number one, if you like good wine, you're going to love Baco Noir. You just have to go to the right places. There are some places that are making really great Baco Noir. Again, I can't stress it enough. You can find Steve Castle's wines over at Malaya Vineyards. Mark Girardet over in Oregon are making fabulous Baco Noirs. Henry of Pelham in the Niagara Peninsula is making fantastic Baco Noirs. There are several others. I'm just not remembering them all off my hand. And again, Oregon, there are some other lovely Baco Noirs. Adirondack Vineyards makes actually a very good Baco Noir. And another good Baco Noir is Warwick Valley Winery. Their Black Dirt wine is their Black Dirt Red is a Baco Noir. And it's a lovely, bright, fresh red wine. That's one of their best sellers, and it lasts in the bottle. It's not meant to be. It's a great wine. You could either have it as a picnic wine with pizza and burgers, or you can go better with it. And it's a wonderful wine. So there's a lot of other good people making those wines out there. I think that's the first thing is that recognize some of the people that are out there doing that. The other side is that don't be afraid of hybrids. There are some people out there doing some really bad things with hybrids. Sorry about that. But then again, I know there are some people doing that with, white.
Anything.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there are just some spectacular hybrids going around right now. And I think you got to stop thinking about hybrid as a dirty word. We've got to really get beyond that. As a manufacturer or a producer, I should say, I was always like horrified. They'd go to like Hungary, and here's the great new grape from Hungary. And I was just like, we have all these great new grapes here in the United States, and all anybody wants to talk about are the big six. So there's so much going on with these grapes that you really want to do that. The other thing is, the one thing about hybrids that I have to stress too, Baco Noir being chief among them, is they don't require as much maintenance. They don't require as much spraying, which was another reason we wanted to grow these grapes. We had our family and our dogs living on this property, and anything that required less material needing to be sprayed on these vines to make them live was all the better, because we wanted to think about that first. And that was another big reason why we grew grapes. We lessened our carbon footprint, and we lessened the amount of material that we were putting into the atmosphere. That was a really big issue for us. So those are some of the things that I would say, and some of these wines can last a really long time. I mean, I somebody called me and said, I've got Baco Noirs from 10 years ago. I'm like, okay, you saved them. Okay, it's now the time to start drinking. But they do last. They're not just open it up and guzzle it. There's some really fine wines out there. They can be laid down, and you can get some great stuff out there. So there's a lot of good things going on, and don't be afraid to try some of these new grapes: Marquette, Chelois, Baco Noir. These grapes, they're making some great wines, and you got to check them out.
Thank you. And can people find you on social media? How can they, No,
I'm unavoidable, I think.
You are.
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I have a blog, which I need to get back to. I've been writing too many books called East Coast Wineries. I just recently won, some award for from the Eastern Seaboard fine folks of the Eastern Seaboard. Grant Crandall for my contributions for writing about East Coast wines.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you. And I also did the Great American Winery Stroopwafel, which some new episodes will be coming out shortly. So, which is my video series on YouTube. So you can find me anywhere. You can email me. I'm a pretty easy guy to get a hold of.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Carlo, so much for doing take 2 on Baco. Hopefully this one will record.
I could do that. I could do this part in my sleep. Guys, thank you so much for having me and letting me do it again.
Well, we appreciate it. We understand how busy you are, so we appreciate you taking the time to do it again. And the fact that you are so knowledgeable in it to share with our listeners, we are very, very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That wraps it up.
So right? I will raise a glass. Mm-hmm. Elmo will say thank you also.
Thank you.
So slancha.
Cheers.
Slancha.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Cheers.
That was Alexa.
That's a great way to end it.
That is Alexa. A great way. Have a good one, everyone.
Guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great one. Thanks for having me again. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoytbud. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Music is Wine by Kevens. Until next week, slancha.
I want to light your glass right now.